So we got the truck started yesterday and got it up to temperature. The engine manual says that you have to start the engine and let it idle to warm up, and then you need to adjust the valves again. So the first time we adjusted them to 20 thousandths of an inch. This time we need to do the final adjustment to 15 thousandths of an inch. The tools that we're going to need for that are the feeler gauges, we're going to need a wrench, I forget which size, and a screwdriver. They should all be right here in this pile. We're also going to need a notebook. I moved the notebook over there. And we are going to need the socket and ratchet to take the valve cover off. I've already loosened it. So we just take the two valve cover nuts off, set those aside, and then we can take the valve cover off. Okay. That end. And then like that. Now, adjusting the valves isn't too complicated. What you need to do is figure out which ones are up all the way. So you can maybe tell that this first one is depressed. That is an intake valve. So in the first cylinder, the intake valve is open. And then this valve is also opened. But this one, you see how there's a little play in it? That means that the valve is closed. This one's open. That one. You start with the ones that are loose, and you adjust them to the proper thickness using these gauges here. So that is 32 thousandths of an inch thick. For this engine, and for each engine it is going to be different, but for this engine here, the initial, for this engine here, I got the stuff from the engine manual, all of the information. I got this printed version. It's really nicely printed. It's from the manual guys. It's really nice quality. I do get nervous when I buy like reprints, because sometimes the pages are blurry, but in this case it was a really good manual. So I bought the engine manual from them, and I'm planning on buying some other manuals from them very soon that have to do with the truck. But anyway, according to the engine manual, the initial adjustment is for 20 thousandths of an inch, and then after you let it warm up, you readjust to 15 thousandths of an inch. So that is what we are going to do today. And we also need to check the torque on the head bolts first. So that is what we are going to do. First is check the torque on all the head bolts, just to make sure they're tight. So why do valves need to be adjusted anyway? Well, you don't want any parts of your engine to be too loose. If the valves are loose, they'll be rattling around in there, and the rocker arms could break, the push rods could bend, the valve springs could crack, etc. However, why do you need a gap? You need a gap because as things heat up, they expand. If the valves are adjusted too tight, there won't be any room for expansion. Also, if the valves are too tight or too loose, it can affect how far they open and therefore can affect the performance of the engine. with my 15 thousandths gauge, I'm going to put it into one of these valves that are loose. I'm going to stick it between the rocker arm and the top of the valve, and that is going to hold the right gap for me. Then I am going to take my wrench, my 9/16 wrench, and I am going to loosen the nut. So this nut keeps the adjuster in place, and then the screw on the top is what actually moves the adjuster. So you loosen the nut, you turn the adjuster until the gauge is just tight. You can still slide it in and out, but you can feel it start to catch. And that's how you know you have it right. And then you need to hold the adjuster in place with the screwdriver. Come on, get off of there. Well, you use the wrench to tighten the nut. There we go. One down and a lot more to go. Now, I'm going to go through and I am going to adjust all of the ones that are loose right now. And keep track of when I adjust them. I have a list here. So I have 12 valves, 2 for each cylinder. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So valve number 4 is now adjusted at 0.015 or 15 thousandths. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to adjust all the ones that have the valve closed, and then I am going to bump the starter to turn over the engine to close the valves that are open now so that I can adjust them. And that's really all there is to it. You have to go through and readjust every valve. It's not too complicated, it just takes a little while. Now, the first time I adjusted the valves, we actually took the radiator out, and that way we could turn the engine over by hand using a nut on the front of the engine. But now that it's full of coolant, we can't do that, so I'm just going to use the starter. So I have the battery plugged in. I'm just going to just press the starter. It'll turn the engine over, and hopefully it will make it so that the valves that we still need to adjust are all up, and the ones that we've adjusted, they can go down. It doesn't really matter. Now I am turning the engine over with the ignition off, so that's something you can do in this truck. There's an ignition switch, but then there's a starter pedal. So we can have the ignition switch off and use the starter pedal, and the starter will still engage and it'll turn over, but it won't start because there's no power going to the distributor. So that's what I'm going to do, just to make sure it doesn't start up on me, because without the valve cover on, it might splurt oil everywhere. Okay, let's see if that did it. Okay, so I'm looking at the list of the valves we still need to adjust. Number 1 is now free. Number 6, 4, 5, 6 is now free. 7, 8 is now free. 9, 10 is now free, and 12. 12 appears to not be free. So I'm going to adjust all of those, and then we'll have to bump the starter one more time to get that 12th valve free, and then we can adjust that, and then we'll be good to go. So I'm going to go through, it's the same procedure, it's just different valves this time.